The first red flag appeared in a routine audit. I was reviewing the quarterly reports for Montgomery Industries, where I worked as head of internal auditing, when I noticed a discrepancy in the international shipping records. A series of containers leaving our Portland facility didn't match any incoming inventory. My name is Diana Wells, and after 15 years in corporate accounting, I thought I'd seen every trick in the book. But this was different. The numbers weren't just wrong, they were deliberately misleading. I was working late that night, diving deeper into the records when my husband James called. "Don't wait up," he said, his voice distant. "Late meeting with Emma about the Johnson account." Emma, his new secretary, 26, fresh out of business school and completely devoted to her job. Or so James claimed. I made a noncommittal sound and hung up, turning back to my spreadsheets. These days, I found more comfort in numbers than in my marriage. The shipping discrepancies kept leading me down rabbit holes. Each container had proper documentation, but the contents never seemed to arrive anywhere. It was as if the shipments were phantoms, existing only on paper. I was so absorbed in my work that I almost missed the next red flag, a series of wire transfers to a shell company in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger automatic alerts, but consistent. Like clockwork, every third Tuesday of the month, exactly $49,999 would leave our corporate accounts. Just under the $50,000 threshold that would require additional reporting. "Mrs. Wells?" My assistant Michael's voice startled me. "Sorry to interrupt, but Mr. Montgomery is asking about the Q3 audit. Says he needs it by tomorrow." Robert Montgomery, aita, CEO and grandson of the company's founder, known for his impatience and expensive tastes. "Tell him it's almost ready," I said, though I knew I was nowhere near finished. Something wasn't adding up, and I couldn't let it go. That night, as I drove home through the rain, I called James again. Straight to voicemail. A quick check of the tracking app we'd installed years ago showed his phone at the Paramount Hotel downtown. Working late indeed. I should have been angry, hurt something. Instead, I felt oddly detached. My mind was still on those phantom shipments, those careful wire transfers. I needed to focus on that, not on my crumbling marriage. The house was dark when I arrived. I made my way to my home office, spreading the files across my desk. The more I dug, the more patterns emerged. The shipping records, the wire transfers, they were all connected to a subsidiary company, Global Solutions Trading Ltd. A company that, as far as I could tell, didn't actually exist. My phone buzzed. A text from James. "Working late, don't wait up." Attached was a photo of takeout containers on his office desk, carefully staged to show he was working. But I could see Emma's designer purse in the background, casually placed on his couch. I almost laughed. He thought he was being so clever, so careful. Just like these financial records in front of me, everything arranged to tell a story that wasn't quite true. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. I needed access to records that weren't in the digital system, old paper files from before the company's modernization push. The archives were in the basement, dusty and forgotten, but they might hold the key to understanding what I was seeing. I was elbow deep in old ledgers when I heard footsteps. Robert Montgomery himself, looking out of place in his bespoke suit among the dusty shelves. "Diana," he said, forcing a smile. "Quite dedicated, aren't we? The current audit is on your desk, isn't it?" "Just being thorough," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Some discrepancies in the international shipping division. Nothing major, I'm sure." His smile tightened slightly. "Well, don't let it distract you from the current quarter. That's what matters now." As he turned to leave, I noticed his hands. They were shaking slightly. Robert Montgomery, IA, who'd never shown a moment of uncertainty in his life, was nervous. That's when I knew I was onto something big. Something that went far beyond my husband's affair or my troubled marriage. Something that could shake Montgomery Industries to its core. I just had to prove it. That evening, I decided to follow James. It wasn't hard. His late meetings had become predictable. I watched from my car as he and Emma entered the Paramount Hotel, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. They looked comfortable together, practiced. This wasn't their first time. But I wasn't there for them. The Paramount had another guest I was interested in, Harold Chen, CEO of Pacific Gate Shipping, Montgomery Industries' primary transportation partner. The same company that handled those phantom shipments. I traced the pattern back 5 years to when Pacific Gate first won our shipping contract. The containers, the wire transfers, all of it started then. My phone buzzed. An email from Michael, my assistant. He found something in the archived payroll records. Every quarter since the Pacific Gate contract began, 6 consulting fees were paid to offshore accounts, each payment carefully structured to avoid detection. I was about to dig deeper when a knock on my car window made me jump. James stood there, his face twisted with anger. "Are you following me?" he demanded as I rolled down the window. "Actually, I'm working," I replied calmly. "But it's interesting that you assumed I was here for you." His expression shifted from anger to confusion. "Working? Here?" "Harold Chen is staying here," I said, watching his reaction carefully. "You know him, right? Head of Pacific Gate Shipping?" The color drained from James's face. "Diana, whatever you think you found." "What I found," I cut him off, "is a pattern of suspicious shipments and wire transfers dating back 5 years. What I don't know yet is how deep it goes, or who else is involved." He glanced around nervously. "You need to drop this. You have no idea what you're getting into." "Like you drop our marriage for Emma?" I asked, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. "This isn't about Emma," he hissed. "This is about your obsession with those damn files. You're going to get yourself hurt." Was that a threat or a warning? Before I could ask, Emma appeared behind him, her face flushed with embarrassment. "James," she called softly. "Everything okay?" He straightened up, composing himself. "Fine, just dealing with something." I started my car, but James grabbed the door. "Diana, please, let this go. For your own good." I met his gaze. "You know what's interesting about numbers, James? They don't lie. People do." As I drove away, I caught his reflection in my rearview mirror. He was already on his phone, probably warning someone about our conversation. Back home, I encrypted everything I'd found and sent copies to secure servers. If James' reaction was any indication, I wasn't just chasing accounting irregularities anymore. This was something bigger, something dangerous. The next morning, Robert Montgomery was waiting in my office. "Diana," he said, his usual confidence back in place. "I'm afraid we have to let you go." I'd expected this. On what grounds? Unauthorized access to confidential records. Harassment of business partners. He slid a document across my desk. "Sign this NDA, and you'll receive 6 months severance." I picked up the paper, pretending to read it. "And if I don't?" His smile turned cold. "Then things become unpleasant. For everyone involved." I thought about James's warning, about those phantom shipments, about Harold Chen at the Paramount. "I'll need time to review this with my lawyer," I said. 24 hours, Montgomery replied. "After that, the offer expires." As security escorted me out, I passed Emma's desk. She couldn't meet my eyes. James stood in his office doorway, watching silently as I left. They thought they'd won, that I'd take the money and disappear. They had no idea what I'd already set in motion. I walked into the FBI field office at exactly 9 a.m. the next morning. Agent Sarah Martinez was waiting for me, surrounded by the evidence I'd been quietly sending her for weeks. "The shipping containers," she said without preamble. "They're not empty, are they?" I shook my head. "Based on the weight discrepancies and the routing patterns, they're being used to smuggle something valuable enough to justify billions in fake transactions." The investigation moved quickly after that. My detailed financial records provided the framework for a massive operation. Pacific Gate Shipping wasn't just moving goods, it was facilitating one of the largest smuggling operations on the West Coast. By noon, search warrants were being executed at Montgomery Industries, Pacific Gate Shipping, and a dozen other locations. Harold Chen was arrested trying to board a private jet to Hong Kong. Robert Montgomery was led out of his office in handcuffs, his perfect facade finally cracking. James called me in a panic. "What have you done?" he demanded. "Me?" I replied calmly. "I just followed the numbers. They led straight to a $4 billion smuggling operation. Interesting how you never noticed, considering you signed off on half those shipping manifests." The silence on his line was deafening. "They'll kill me," he whispered finally. "The FBI can protect you," I said. "If you cooperate, tell them everything you know about the operation." He did. James turned out to be a mid-level player, helping falsify documents and coordinate shipments without fully understanding the scope of the operation. His affair with Emma had been orchestrated. She was Robert Montgomery's niece, placed in the company to keep an eye on potential whistleblowers. The investigation revealed a sprawling criminal enterprise. Montgomery Industries had been using its legitimate shipping business as cover for moving illegal goods across international borders. The careful financial manipulation, the wire transfers, the consulting fees, the phantom shipments had hidden billions in illegal profits. When the dust settled, Robert Montgomery and Harold Chen faced decades in federal prison. James accepted a plea deal in exchange for his testimony. Emma disappeared, presumably back to whatever hole Montgomery had found her in. I testified before a grand jury, laying out the complex web of financial fraud that had hidden the smuggling operation. My detailed records and methodical investigation had provided the foundation for the entire case. The media called it the biggest corporate smuggling bust in decades. Montgomery Industries' stock plummeted, then rebounded when new leadership took over. I was offered my job back with a promotion to chief financial officer. I declined. Instead, I started my own forensic accounting firm specializing in detecting complex financial fraud. My first client, the FBI. James wrote to me from prison a year later. "I'm sorry," he said, "for everything. You were right about the numbers. They don't lie. People do." I didn't respond. Some lies don't deserve forgiveness. Today, my firm is the go-to consultant for companies wanting to protect themselves from financial fraud. I teach at universities, sharing the lessons learned from the Montgomery case. Students are always fascinated by how a simple accounting discrepancy led to uncovering a billion-dollar criminal enterprise. Pay attention to the details, I tell them. Numbers tell stories, you just have to know how to read them. Sometimes I think about James, about the life we had before it all fell apart, about how his betrayal led me to uncover something far bigger than our failed marriage, about how his attempt to hide his affair pushed me to look closer at numbers that didn't add up. In the end, it wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about truth, the kind that lives in spreadsheets and ledgers, in wire transfers and shipping manifests. The kind that can't be hidden, no matter how clever the lies around it. Because that's the thing about numbers. They always tell the truth, even when everyone else is lying.